Turn to Luke 7. Luke chapter 7, we're going to start reading at verse 36. Now one of the Pharisees was requesting him to dine with him, and he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. There was a woman in the city who was a sinner, and when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster vial of perfume. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and kept wiping them with the hair of her head, and kissing his feet and anointing them with the perfume. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who and what sort of person this woman is who is touching him, that she is a sinner. And Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he replied, say it, teacher. A money lender had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they were unable to repay, he graciously forgave them both. So which of them will love him more? Simon answered and said, I suppose the one he forgave more. And he said to him, you have judged correctly. Turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but since the time I came in, she has not ceased kissing my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she anointed my feet with perfume. For this reason I say to you, her sins, which are many, have been forgiven her. For she loved much, but he who is forgiven little loves little. And he said to her, your sins have been forgiven. Those who were reclining at the table with him began to say to themselves, who is this man who even forgives sins? And he said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. I suggest you keep your ribbon at that opening. We'll be coming back to it. What we have in this text is a comparison of hearts. We have Simon's heart compared to the woman's heart. And Jesus, of course, has compassion on both, although it's not as obvious with Simon perhaps, but he came to seek and save the lost, and that's his focus. And so we look at his compassion. Of course, we find it inviting, we find it appealing, and thus we find also a role model for ourselves. Simon, as you notice, his heart simply was not impressed with the scene that was before him. His heart was totally unsurrendered, while her heart was totally, absolutely, completely surrendered to him. She poured her heart out before him. She wanted Jesus more than she wanted anything else. And so in this lesson, we compare attitudes towards sinners and our hearts and things along that line, and we'll get right into point number one. The Pharisee looked at her, and she was a sinner. There's no question about that. And he saw her reputation. He saw her past. Luke 7:39, which we just read, he said, if this man were a prophet, he would know who and what sort of person this woman is who's touching him. You get the feeling he wouldn't even let this woman touch him, that she's a sinner. You get a little bit of the arrogance, the uppityness there. Here is a woman who comes in, and she is pouring out her heart in tears. She is humbling herself to the point of wiping Jesus' feet with her own hair. Probably not a real profitable occupation she's in, and yet she pours perfume upon his feet, and Simon can't see any of that. He can't see the tears. All he can see is her past and that she has a bad reputation. And so Simon sits there in his uppity religiousness. Is that really a word? His uppity religiousness, and he judges both of them. He looks down on the woman because, well, she's a sinner. And he looks down on Christ because he's letting a sinner touch him and doesn't shoo her off and run her away like a good Pharisee would do. A good Pharisee would rather not be caught, within 10 feet of such a person, and thus he sets in his judgment. So here's a man who knows how to look religious. To put it in our modern terminology, he knows how to show up the building at 9 o'clock. He knows the right clothes to wear. He knows the right Christianese to speak as he talks about things in the foyer and with other folks. And he knows how the program goes. And then he walks away thinking, boy, I'm such a fine Christian because I went through all the protocol just exactly like it was supposed to. But it never touched his heart. And we all know where God looks, right? He forgot the heart of religion. And the heart of religion is not just a teaching thing. If memory serves me right, it's Psalms 51 and 17 where he says, a broken and contrite heart, these God will not refuse. That's what God has always been looking for, is a broken and contrite heart. That's nothing brand new with Christ. That's been going around since David and even before. So what Simon forgot is that this whole thing is a rescue mission. This is not a museum where we put our perfection and our goodness and our progress on display and say, oh, look at me, I've made it this far. This is a place what I often describe it as a hospital for the spiritually sick. And some are sicker than others. I get that too. But that doesn't matter, does it? We're not like JRMC, who if you come in too sick, they're not going to accept you. Now, in all fairness, they'll send you to Little Rock because they're not fully staffed. I understand that. But we don't do that because we have the ultimate position. We have the top position, and he can deal with anyone who is willing to humble themselves as the woman humbled herself before Christ. But Simon was more interested in his image. He was more interested in looking the part than actually having the compassion that was in the heart of God. From, let's say, John 3:16, where God so loved the world, which included that women and women like her and everybody in between on the scale, however you envision that. So our question for the moment is, would the woman in Luke 7 feel safe in our presence or judged and distanced? And I understand that a lot of people would have different answers to that. And there's a lot of complex things that go on inside of the person who has already rejected themselves and already hates themselves and can't believe for the life of them that anyone would ever love and open their hearts to them. I understand that side of it. But for those of us who are regulars, we need to be sure that our heart is open. And a person who can get across their own self-rejection, and that is so very, very real. People think it. It's so common. I don't like me. How could anybody else like me? Therefore, anything that is said is interpreted in a very negative way. But we still want that open environment where the person who can get across their own self-hatred can go, hey, these are some very good people. Would she feel comfortable? Or would she feel judged and pushed off at a distance? The forgiveness and the penitent heart, of course, can't say, stay silent. Let's drop down to verse 47 for just a second. It says, for this reason I say to you, her sins, which are many, have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. And she sat there and just poured out her heart because she understood the great forgiveness that was before her. Now, I want you to notice there was no formal confession. There was no formal assembly. There wasn't a sermon and an invitation song. And, as I always say at the end of every service, because you got to have something to say at the end of a service, right? If we can be of help to you in a public manner, let us do so. As together can you finish the statement? And that's something along that line is really, 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 really common. But look at this time of repentance, this person coming back to Christ, and there's none of that. There is simply a woman who knew Jesus was in that house. And she went and brought her heart. And she's behind him at his feet. And she's weeping, and she's wiping his feet, and she's doing what little she can. That's it. That's what God is looking for. Now, am I saying it's wrong to come forward? Absolutely not. That is absolutely fine. But humbling yourself is the more important thing. Is it possible to come forward at the end of a service and not really bring your heart? Absolutely. We could tell story after story of somebody who came forward after the sermon on Sunday and said, I haven't been living right and I need to make a change and I need to get things together and I'm getting ready to turn around, and we don't see them again. Sunday evening shows up, they're not back. Wednesday shows up, they're not there either. Next Sunday, what did they bring to the front? I'm not exactly sure what, but I know one thing they did not bring to the front. They did not bring a humble, broken, and contrite heart to the front. They brought a performance, if you would. So here's a woman who had the opportunity, and I would say it would be a rather awkward opportunity, but she had the opportunity. And I don't know how she got in, how open everything was, and exactly what the setting was, but she saw a way to Jesus, and she took that way to Jesus and took advantage of that opportunity, and therein found what we eventually read in verse 50, the very forgiveness she desired, because she poured her heart out. Now we have another case in Acts 16, it's verse 14 and 15 there, where it's just a little brief mention of Lydia. And Lydia, of course, is a woman of a different caliber. There's no question about that. But at the same time, it said God opened her heart. And while she did not sit behind Jesus' feet and pour out tears and perfume, it did say that she wanted to be of service. And she says to Paul, if you have counted me just, then come stay at my house. And she put them up. Now you got to remember, that's back in the days when you didn't have Tom Bodette and Motel 8 or 6 or whatever that was. And so she opened her heart to hospitality, which is another sign of a good heart, right? What's the use of having a house if you can't use it in the service of the Lord? That's kind of a good question. So our question now at this point is, do we worship like people that have been forgiven much, or do we hold back? Is our heart all in, like the woman weeping at Jesus' feet, or like Lydia, putting herself at some inconvenience and saying, come stay at my house? Where are we? We all want to be forgiven. Nobody wants eternal ruin. At least I hope no one does. But what do our actions say? Because as our header will continually remind you, actions speak louder than words. We say it this way all the time in our culture. Talk is cheap. Absolutely cheap. Anybody can talk a good game. I don't want to hear the game you can talk so much. I want to see the game you can play. That's what Jesus is saying. Show me your faith. Later on, James would say that same thing. You can tell me about your faith. James chapter 2 starts about verse 14, but he says, I'll show you my faith by my works. Oh, that's what we're looking for. So this woman loved a lot. She knew her need, and the Pharisee didn't know his need. Sometimes that's the advantage of having an obvious sin. That can be the advantage of having a sin that anybody with enough sense to come in out of the rain can see that's wrong. The idea that most of our commentators make is that sinner meant she was a prostitute. Do any of us have trouble understanding that prostitution is a sin? I mean, it's out there, right? There's the big obvious sin. Nobody can deny it. This has been this way through all of humanity. That has always been a looked down upon profession, and rightly so. Now here's the Pharisee, though. He's got just as much sin, but he can't see it. He has the sin of self-righteousness. He has the sin of, well, at least I'm not a prostitute. Which is always ironic to me, because what do we teach? A sin is a sin is a sin. Now, some of them are more culturally offensive to us than others, but whether you just minorly, small way dishonor your father and mother, where are you going? Somebody say hell. Or you do something that is out there in the open for the whole community to see, where you're going. Somebody say hell. What is the inroad of any sin? Hell. So how is it that we get this idea in our head, well, at least I never was a, start filling in the blank, because we all have it. We all have been raised in a culture where for some reason or another there was some sin or another that was put down so low that as long as you didn't do that sin, you were better than other people. It may be the simple lips that touch wine will never touch mine. Oh, really? Interesting, right? And of course, all the obvious sexual sins go there, and then the drug community goes there, and then some people are like, I always pay my bills. I never steal from anyone, as though the thief is the worst sinner of all. No, they're all bad. They're all wicked. And the sin of self-righteousness, and I'm holier than thou, is just as wicked and condemning as the woman's sin. But she saw it. She knew it. And he was so wrapped up in his self-righteousness, he couldn't see what he was guilty of. He couldn't see himself as judging. Oh, you know what he would have said if we were in the modern times. He would have said, oh, John 7:24, I'm judging righteous judgment. We can characterize things in so many wonderful ways. I think it's amazing. So Simon's holding Jesus' arm length. He wants Jesus in the house, but he doesn't want Jesus getting too comfortable. So he wants him present, wants to be able to say, oh, I had him as a guest, I had him over for dinner. But he doesn't want Jesus where Jesus wants to be, and that is in his heart, changing and transforming every aspect of his life. So Simon didn't even offer a common courtesy. Didn't even have the decency to offer him a foot washing, which I know to us sounds a little bit odd because that's not what we do. Some of these days, if I get really ornery, I'm going to get a big old bowl, and when you come over to my house for lunch or something, I'm going to come up beside you and say, okay, take your shoes off, time to wash your feet. And you're going to look at me like I'm a nut, because in our culture, I would be a nut. There is no need for that in our culture. But in their culture, where they walked around in sandals at best on dirty roads, yes, they needed some of that. But he didn't offer them that. Not the least consideration there. And sometimes we're the same too, aren't we? Romans 3:23 says, for all sin and fall short of the glory of God. That's all of us. We're all in the same boat, doomed for eternal torment. And yet, Simon just couldn't get it. He just couldn't believe he was in the same boat with that woman. Let's go to Ephesians 2. I want to read verses 1 through 4. Let me go ahead and give you that next click there. Whether you're somebody who's been caught up in what sometimes we call the dark, seedy side of life, doing things that we do not want to discuss, and incidentally, they do not need to be discussed, or whether you grew up in a traditional, what we sometimes refer to as Christian home, we're all still in the same boat, needing the blood of Christ. So Ephesians 2:1, and you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you formerly walked, according to the course of this world, according to the prince of power of the air, the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Among them we too all formerly lived in the lust of our flesh, indulging the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. But God, being rich in mercy because of his great love which he loved us, even when we were dead in our transgressions, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. We were all in the same boat. different seats in the boat, but isn't that a little bit funny? So we're all on the Titanic of sin, sinking more or less, but we're going, yeah, but I'm in first class. And the third class down there on the lower decks, no, you're all in the same boat going down together. It's just absurd to even use that analogy. But that's what Simon was doing. And so the question is, are we like Simon or are we like the woman? Do we understand our need? Or do we deny our need? I'm going to say it this way in class when we get into our class material. I'm going to say none of us are 100% wrong. Let me say that again. None of us are 100% wrong. But none of us are 100% right either. We're on a spectrum there somewhere. I don't care where you identify yourself on that spectrum. I'm not about to quibble that with you. But the fact is, I know you're not at 100%. You're somewhere down here. And those who understand their needs see the lack between there and 100% and keep striving toward perfection, keep striving the upward way, keep striving to let Christ be manifest in them where they be conformed to the image of Christ. She knew her need. She saw it. The Pharisee didn't. Which one are we? And it gets dangerous. Let me say it again. When I'm down here on the spectrum, nobody's 100% evil totally. Well, met some pretty bad ones, but nobody's 100% evil all the time. But you get down here in the lower quarter, it's pretty easy to point out some places you need to go. But as you move on up the scale, and you're getting around 75, 80%, 85% maybe, it's harder to see these other things on the 15% that's remaining. That's tough because they don't stand out in a bright, big glare like this woman's sins. They're much subtler. And then another danger comes in because so much of the crowd looks at you and goes, man, you have grown so much. You have matured so much. You have so much spirituality. And if we're not careful, we'll listen to it. And we'll start to believe it. And the fact is, we were all dead in our sins. So Jesus is measuring the hearts. You get back there, my Luke 7:44. Do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet. She has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. So Simon offered him a meal. That was nice. She offered her heart. Now, the meal I'm going to say was nice. But let me give you a little perspective when you're dealing with Jesus. Who took 2 loaves, 2 fishes, and 5 loaves and fed 5,000 people? How desperate is Jesus for this meal? When Mary and Martha were fussing over who ought to be working in the kitchen, how desperate and worried was Jesus over what was going on in the kitchen? I don't want to say that the meal was totally insignificant. It was a nice gesture. But Jesus didn't show up for the food. Jesus was looking for hearts. That's what he was looking for. So Simon gave the proper protocol. Okay. She gave the passion. And that's what Jesus was looking for. Think about Matthew 12:43 for just a moment. I won't turn there. You know the story about the widow and the 2 mites. And they're watching all the people put in out of their abundance. And that impresses the eye of the flesh so much. And Jesus catches the widow and her 2 mites. And he says she put in more than everything. What was it? It was her heart. It wasn't the money at all. It was the passion of her heart. And to give out of our abundance is like, we're not being as great as we might think we are. It's the heart that counts. So whether you have the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, a cup of cold water, or just the widow's 2 mites, God's looking for the heart behind it. All the woman had was tears, some long hair, I presume, a little bit of perfume. And you know, if she hadn't had the perfume, the story would have been just as profound. That she kneeled, she wept, and wiped his feet with her hair. Wouldn't have changed a thing, would it? So the question is, are we waiting for the spotlight, for all the eyes to be on us and go, oh, wow, look at this guy. He's so great. He's so awesome. Look at the great service he's rendering. Are we just pouring out what little we have? And I'm going to emphasize it again, and I've done it a lot recently, Colossians 3:23. Everything you do it as though you're doing it for the Lord. And when I talk about pouring out a little, I'm not looking for big things. I don't think he's looking for big things. If you have an opportunity to do a big thing, sure, go ahead and do it. But what about a mama who takes time to set down her phone and her social media and actually interact with her child and tell her child Bible stories, perhaps, or just teach her child Bible lessons? And these can be so simple. When I was quite young, probably about kindergarten, there were some beautiful flowers at the house next door where we happened to be. And of course, I had to go over and pick one, but it wasn't mine to pick. And Mama taught me a lesson because she took me over to that lady's door to hold that flower and knock on it and say, I'm sorry, I stole one of your flowers. Those little things. That's what I'm talking about. Just the phone calls, the visit. People all the time saying, we thank you for the cards and the prayers and the phone calls. And from a healthy point of view, you go, yeah, okay, but no. When you're the one that's been laid up in the hospital, or you're put away in the nursing home, and the only people you see is staff and a couple of other residents, and then somebody shows up and breaks up the monotony of your day, or you get a card. I know some of the teachers here will take the kids and have them make up their own cards, and they'll send 5 or 6 of them at a time to somebody in the hospital or whatever. And I have never yet had anyone complain about that. I've never heard anyone go, oh, I got all these stupid cards from all these dumb kids. No. It's just that just lit up my heart so much. That just did me so much good. And you know what's at the back of it, I think? Is somebody took the time to think of them. Whether it's just a phone call, you took the time to think. Whether it's a visit to the nursing home, you took the time to think. It's the little things. That's really, don't wait for some big spotlight opportunity. Those are few and far between. Just pour out your 2 mites. You'll be doing good. It's not too late. In Luke 7:50, our final verse of that chapter, he said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. So Jesus gave Simon a mirror of sorts because Simon needed to see some things. He told him, in essence, look at her. See her passion. See her compassion. Notice verse 44. It's subtle, but it's there. Turning to the woman, he said to Simon. Normally, when you're addressing someone, who do you turn to? The person you're addressing. But turning to the woman, he talked to Simon. He's using the woman as an illustration for Simon to contemplate and consider. Her tears exposed the dryness of his heart, the dryness of his religion, and here he had a front row seat to all of that. Now, the question is, what's he going to do with it? He's had his dryness and his protocol and his formality challenged. Not that protocol is wrong, and not that formality is wrong, but if there's no depth of heart in it, then it's just empty. It's just a shell. So he still had time. I wonder if he used it. I wonder what he did with that over time. So we use this question now. Do we come to Jesus to analyze or to adore? Simon analyzed. I used the word judging earlier, but that's what he did. Well, if Jesus was really a prophet, and he analyzed the situation. The woman just cried, poured out her heart. So she had nothing but tears. Why? Because this is, I don't think I can get it said right. That's all Christ wants. He doesn't care about your bank account, your car, your house, your history, nothing else. He wants those penitent tears that says, Lord, I want to come home. Simon had all the right credentials. They were both there with Jesus. The woman with the tears in the past made the connection because Jesus does welcome the brokenhearted. So if you're in a hurting place, you don't have to stay there. You have a Savior. And all He's looking for is that broken and contrite heart. And the one that kneels at the feet of Jesus always walks away light. Now, I almost don't want to say now if we can help you in a public way, because I already said that way back off in the first of the sermon, and it sounds redundant, but I'm going to be redundant because that's the way I usually close. So if you're not in that lighter, happier place, and then it's time to find yourself behind the feet of Jesus, letting your tears out and letting Him forgive you. If you're subject to our public invitation, let us do so while together. We stand.